wrestling a lot of guys kind of prepared me for wrestling women, I guess, because obviously there's a difference. Um, but very early on, I mainly just kind of tagged along with where other people were going to shows, and then sometimes I would get picked up for the show as well. Like for example, working with High Spots, I went to a lot of shows with them. So, where they were doing like a ring rental or something like that. So one show I showed up for a ring rental, and me and one of the other guys that I trained with, once the ring was set up, we kind of got in and rolled around a little bit, and the promoter was like, "Do you have your gear?" And I said, so this was the one cardinal sin that I committed. It was the one time I did not have my gear with me. And
Ah,
of course, it was very early on. And that's what they tell you from get-go is always bring your gear. Luckily, it wasn't too far from my house. So I drove back. I think it was like 20 minutes to my house, got my gear, came back, and I got put on the show. So sometimes stuff like that happened just because I did have that high spots connection. I was always at different shows. People, networking was always there, because of that. But yeah, like we were talking about earlier, um, when I started in North Carolina, there was already established kind of group of women that was used at a lot of those local shows. Um, so I just got in with them. I was wrestling, kind of a lot of the same girls at first, and then now obviously there's a quite a lot of female wrestlers in North Carolina, and I'm really happy to see that, to be honest.
yeah. We all know you the queen of the Amazons, though, so it's okay. Absolutely. Um, you just hit on something that I thought about, and I didn't think about it until we actually had our show. Um, and I started going down the actual roster, and I told Roosevelt, I said, "Man, we don't have enough women on this show." And it had me thinking, as from a promoter standpoint. I'm not a promoter, I'm not claiming to be, but I was like, I would love to see the presence of more women on these shows. And I was very hyper conscious of the presence of women. So, I wanted to make sure that you guys had a certain amount of locker rooms, but obviously you had some people depot their way in there. Still locker rooms. But how is it being a woman in a male driven industry and having to prove yourself? Because I think that you are one of the greatest talents on the indie scene, male or female. And so
Thank you.
how is it to be in a male driven locker room and still have to prove yourself everywhere that you go?
Yeah. So like you did mention, just in certain situations like having a place for female wrestlers in the locker room. Some places you go and it's like, okay, well, everyone's in the same room. So it's like, okay, well, we'll go change in the bathroom, stuff like that. But yeah, just having a spot, even if it's like a sign on the door, because wrestlers are wrestlers. So even if it's just like a sign on the door, hey, women's locker room, just so that Deboing doesn't happen to take space. But I think, especially around North Carolina, I feel very respected by a lot of the male wrestlers. I don't really have a lot of issues with any of them now. That everyone's pretty respectful. But it is kind of a place where you go to some wrestling shows and they don't have a women's match on the card, at least like one. I really like going to shows where you have more than one. I know stuff like that doesn't happen overnight, like changing places, but I like to at least see two women's matches on a show. If they have more, that's great, also. But it is like you said, it's very important to me to make sure there is female representation in such a heavily male dominated sport, and to change people's views of how they look at women's wrestling or look at female wrestlers, because sometimes there's always a stigma of, well, I wasn't interested in that match, or that was the match I got to go to the bathroom or to get concessions or whatever have you. I definitely always from the beginning wanted to be someone that like people did not want to get up from their seat for. They heard I was on the card, they wanted to be there. And it wasn't just, oh, this, this female wrestling match, because of course for so long it was looked at a certain way. But I
Mhm.
do value places that value me because it shows me that they care about women's wrestling and more than one kind of women's wrestling.